Strange Encounters Ep.4. This is the story about how I almost got fired. On the last day of my internship working on God of War, I was pulled into a meeting with my boss's boss, and they had given me some intellectual property at the start of the internship. And at the end of the internship, I had to give it back, which I did. However, there was very clearly pages missing that had been ripped out. And things did not look good for me, but I'm going to start it from the beginning so you get the context. But thankfully, I was able to get away. So here's the story. It was an amazing internship, but it led to one of those most scary experiences. And to understand the context, it's that it's very common in the video game industry for you to have something called a game design Bible. Okay, and a game design Bible is basically a series of game design documents that are all squished together in a book. And well, in the old days, it used to be a book, right? But now it's usually like something digital, like Confluence. But very often it'll be something physical, especially for artistic direction. And they will hand you this physical book in order to get everybody on the same, literal page, so that everybody can see what the direction, what the art's supposed to look like, get the feel and the vibe. And this particular creative director who I worked with was, wow, what a brilliant guy. I had the opportunity to meet with him for a little bit. And he's a GIF master, okay? He loves GIFs. That's his thing. I went into his office, and he was showing me he has hundreds of GIFs in these folders, very, precisely categorized. And basically his process is whenever he wants something in the game, he'll like find a cool GIF to illustrate that. He's a really good communicator because you can always find the right reference. So for example, there's this fight in the end of God of War where the guy Kratos is like got the bad guy Baldur in a headlock, and he's like pulling him back and like stretching his throat, and the guy's like, hey, you saw that? Well, look at this GIF. And he shows me this GIF where there's these two MMA fighters in the octagon, and they're doing the same exact move. And he's like, this was the GIF that inspired that position, right? And so it's really cool to see how that guy's mind works, but and how he uses these images to sort of, build the story. However, sometimes it can be kind of difficult to get on the same page with someone, right? And you might not be able to have the GIF format all the time. And I think that's why, especially with these, with something very visual, I think it's easier to grasp. But with something that's like, ooh, what's the mood and feel of this environment or this story? That's why these game designers will sometimes, make a book or talk about the narrative. And you might have, in this book particularly, it was like pages of text about the backstory and stuff. However, this book was unique in that it also had activities, which I thought was really fun. It was basically like a kid's coloring book where you'd have, draw in the lines, or in one case you'd have to cut out the figures. And when you cut out these figures, if we were doing a game about SpongeBob, this would be like you do a little cutout of SpongeBob and Patrick, and you could put them on your desk, right? And so I love that because that's actually a pretty common thing in the games industry. Whenever it's pretty common for you to have like these little figurines like this, where you'd put them on your desk and you would just hang out with them, I guess. It's actually pretty common for you to have like a little duck. I think I've got one over here. And there's this kind of programming where you, after you have a tough problem, you could talk to the duck and basically explain your problems, right? Programmers have notoriously bad social skills, right? So if you're dealing with a broken marriage at home, you'd discuss this with your duck, and maybe they'd give you some ideas on how to fix it, right? And then you wouldn't have to talk to anybody. That's the idea. However, I cut out these figures, and I put them on my desk, and I didn't talk to them that often, but they gave me a lot of stress because whenever the cleaning ladies would come, you'd have to hide all your intellectual property, because if they found out, what we were working on, could be a pretty bad situation, right? So I would have to gather all my little dudes and put them in my drawer, right? And so it wasn't very common. This will be relevant later, but it wasn't very common for the programmers. Didn't have a lot of these things cut out. But I love being surrounded by the art and stuff. That's something I do all the time. I'll cut out like the key art and stuff, and I'll put it on my cubicle basically. And the artists do this all the time. If you go to like the artist layer in this studio, they've got like their own layer. There's art on the walls. It's really beautiful. However, the programmers, there's like no lights. It's very dark. They really didn't focus on the art on that side of the studio design, right? So the problem is that at the end of the internship, I had to give back this book. And because none of the other programmers had cut out the shapes or whatever, they didn't realize that there was even a page in the book where you're supposed to cut stuff out. And so when they eventually slid the book to me and they said, Matthew, what the hell? You've cut out pages of the book. I was at first shocked, like, oh my gosh, what? It wasn't me. But then I looked at the book, and the pages in particular said, like, cut on the dotted line. And I was like, no, this is what you're always supposed to do for the book. And they looked and they were like, oh, wow, yeah, you cut out the figures. We've never had anybody do that, at least in our department. And so then they were like, oh, okay. But where are they, right? And so I went back to my desk and I found them in my trash bin. I had thrown them out, the day before I was going to leave. And thankfully they were still there and I could say, okay, here are the dudes. I didn't steal them. Please don't sue me. And thankfully they didn't. So I was able to get away. So that's a story about how I almost got fired. It was the scariest moment in my career, I would say. Probably, yeah. But it was so much fun. Maybe, yeah, even more than when I stole Mark Zuckerberg's desk, I would say. And it was a lot of fun. The internship, an amazing team. Definitely, if you have the opportunity to work with those guys, they're so cool. I will say I've been a little bit nervous recently. You guys know I care a lot about like spiritualism and like ghosts and demons and stuff. And so there was something that happened recently. I got pretty emotional about it because so I was hired as an intern, right? But I didn't get the position, as you guys know. I instead of in the summer, I came in the spring, right? Before the person who got the position, right? This really talented guy. And so eventually I went back to school, but this guy got hired on, right? There was a programmer who basically, went in the steps that I would have taken if things had gone a different way. If I had gotten the job, I would have been in that position. And unfortunately, that programmer later passed away, which really freaked me out because I was like, oh my gosh, if that had been my fate, if I was in that position, would similar things have happened to me? And so that it's such an unfortunate thing, especially with Corona and stuff like that. And man, yeah, it really shook me. So I think that team is, if anything, deserving of more love and support, because they are just such a talented group, such an amazing team. Even if they accidentally almost fired me. So that is the story, about my crazy adventure at the place that I went. And the next story I want to tell you guys about was how me and my current co-founder, best buddy from middle school, Scott Mulligan, got into a fight. Okay, I don't know if I'd say it was a full-on fight. It was definitely a kerfuffle, though. Hands were thrown, and then we later trained in some martial arts, let's say, with this guy who had a fight club. So I'll tell you all about that story in the next one. But for now, if you enjoy that story, go buy God of War. Go give that team some support and love because they're making something awesome for the next round. And, I'm just so excited to see what that's going to be. All right, catch you guys later.